Chris stood before the cracked mirror in the dim dressing room, barely recognizing the battle-worn fighter staring back. The scars and bruises mapped his journey, each a mark of survival. But tonight felt different. This wasn't just another fight, it felt like the last. A quiet knock pulled him from his thoughts. Ashley stepped in, concern in her eyes as she studied him. She knew him too well to be fooled by forced confidence. He could see the worry on her face, but words felt useless. The truth weighed heavy. His body wasn't the same. The speed, the sharp reflexes, the fire that had once driven him forward, it was all fading. He sat on the wooden bench, fists clenched, acknowledging a reality he had tried to ignore. Ashley stayed by his side, a silent source of strength. She had always believed in him, even when he doubted himself. A sharp knock signaled it was time. Taking a deep breath, he stood, straightened his gloves, and walked out. The roar of the crowd grew louder with every step down the long, shadowed corridor. Adrenaline drowned out the fear, the exhaustion, the creeping doubt. Under the bright arena lights, cameras flashed, and voices screamed his name. The fight was brutal. His opponent was young, fast, relentless. Chris struggled to keep up, each blow reminding him of the toll the years had taken. Pain blurred into instinct, his body running on muscle memory alone. The crowd was on its feet, the tension electric. Breath ragged, body aching, he pushed forward. Then came the opening he had been waiting for. Summoning every last ounce of strength, he landed a final, crushing blow. His opponent hit the canvas. The referee counted. The bell rang. Victory was his. But as the cheers erupted, a sharp, searing pain shot through his head. The world tilted. He barely made it to the corner before collapsing against the ropes. The next moments blurred. Doctors, flashing lights, muffled voices. Hours later, clarity returned just long enough to hear the words that shattered everything. His career was over. The damage was too severe. Another fight could cost him his life. In an instant, the world he had built crumbled. Days passed in a haze of silence. He barely moved, barely spoke, lost in the weight of his own emptiness. Ashley stayed, but nothing reached him. The fight had defined him, given him purpose. Without it, he was nothing. Weeks turned into months. Darkness settled in, a heavy force dragging him under. Then, one morning, something shifted. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, cutting through the void. He sat up, staring at the golden streaks on the floor, and realized he had a choice. He could let this destroy him, or he could fight. This time, for himself. Ashley noticed the change immediately. Chris sat in silence, lost in thought, until Ashley gently placed an arm around his shoulders. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose returning. He could no longer fight in the ring, but he could shape the next generation of champions. Seeing the determination in his eyes, Ashley knew the man she had fallen in love with was back. Determined, Chris poured everything into opening his own gym. It wasn't just about fitness. It was about giving young fighters a place to belong, a chance to chase their dreams. The first weeks were brutal. Renovations, equipment purchases, endless paperwork. He worked from dawn until late at night, exhaustion weighing on him. But for the first time since his career ended, he felt alive. Ashley stood by his side, handling finances and helping wherever needed. When the doors finally opened, Chris stood in the center of the gym, a deep sense of pride filling him. Young fighters trickled in, some unsure, others hungry for a second chance. He saw himself in them. The same doubts, the same fire. His training was intense, pushing not just their bodies, but their minds. Strength alone wasn't enough. They needed discipline, confidence, and resilience. Among them, Jake stood out. Tall, strong, with lightning-fast reflexes. He had raw talent, but struggled with control. He fought with emotion rather than strategy, a weakness Chris knew could destroy him. Seeing potential, Chris took him under his wing, guiding him not just as a coach, but as a mentor. The gym thrived faster than expected. Word spread, and soon, Chris wasn't just known as a former boxer, but as a coach who could inspire greatness. Yet doubt still lingered. Could he truly lead these fighters? Could he turn Jake into a champion? Late at night, alone in the empty gym, he stared at the heavy bag, realizing his new ring wasn't confined by ropes. It was the lives of those who trusted him. He vowed never to let them down. One evening, after an exhausting day, a newcomer entered. He carried himself like a boxer. Steady stance, sharp gaze. Chris, intrigued, asked how he could help. Introducing himself as Tom, the young man explained he had fought professionally until an injury forced him out. Instead of giving up, he dedicated himself to coaching, training under some of the best on the East Coast. Chris listened carefully, sensing something familiar in Tom's story. He asked questions, testing his knowledge. And with each answer, it became clear. Tom wasn't just looking for a job, he was looking for a fresh start. When asked why he had come to this city, Tom simply shrugged, a hint of sadness in his smile. Sometimes, he said, you have to leave everything behind and start over. Chris understood those words better than anyone. He nodded, offering a small smile. Come in tomorrow morning. Let's see what you can do. For the first time in years, he wasn't doing this alone. Tom arrived at the gym at sunrise, an hour before training began. Without hesitation, he started setting up, organizing equipment, checking the punching bags, ensuring everything was in place. As the first students trickled in, Chris observed him closely. Tom had a natural ability to connect with the young fighters, explaining techniques with confidence while adapting his approach to each individual. Even with the more difficult students like Jake, he remained patient yet firm. By the end of the day, Chris was sure he had made the right choice. Tom not only had skill, but also an instinct for teaching. He noticed Jake's raw talent and acknowledged the challenge of coaching someone so impulsive. Chris agreed. Jake was his best student, but needed discipline. Together, they could refine him into a champion. The gym, which had started as a dream, was becoming a true training ground for future fighters. Tom's presence played a major role in that transformation. With their shared goal of shaping young boxers, Chris began to look toward the future with real hope for the first time in years. One afternoon, Ashley decided to surprise Chris with lunch. Knowing how he often skipped meals, she packed his favorite roast beef sandwiches, fresh salad, and homemade lemonade. As she arrived at the gym, she paused at the entrance, taking a moment to smooth her hair and collect herself. Stepping inside, she was immediately immersed in the sounds of training. Punching bags thudding, jump ropes whirring, determined voices echoing through the space. She spotted Chris in the far corner, guiding a student through a drill. The moment he saw her, his stern coaching expression softened into a warm smile. As he walked toward her, she playfully revealed the basket, knowing he had forgotten to eat again. They settled on a bench near the wall where she laid out the food. Tom approached hesitantly, noticing Ashley for the first time. Chris introduced them, and Ashley immediately sensed his sincerity. He carried himself with quiet confidence, and something about his demeanor earned her trust. As they shared lunch, she learned more about Tom's past, his struggles, his decision to leave behind his boxing career, and how training others had given him new purpose. Tom admitted he was grateful to have found the gym and Chris as a mentor. Ashley, proud of her husband, acknowledged how he had always believed in others, even when they doubted themselves. Tom, not used to praise, shifted uncomfortably but couldn't hide his appreciation. After lunch, he returned to training, and Ashley turned to Chris with a knowing smile. She liked Tom. He had the potential to be more than just an assistant. Chris agreed. Together, they could take the gym to new heights. As Ashley left, she felt lighter, reassured that Chris had found his path again. Watching her go, Chris reflected on how life had brought the right people into his world at the moments he needed them most. Later that evening, he thought back to the night he first met Ashley. It had been after a grueling fight, his body sore, his mind clouded with exhaustion. He walked into a quiet bar, seeking a drink and a moment of escape. The warm lighting and soft music made the place feel inviting, but it was Ashley who caught his attention. She stood behind the bar, laughing as she spoke with a customer, her smile so genuine that, for a second, Chris forgot his pain. When their eyes met, something shifted inside him. She greeted him with the same warm expression and asked for his order. He requested whiskey, and she poured it without breaking eye contact. Sensing the weight of his day, she asked if it had been tough. No more than usual, he had answered with a smirk. Her name was Ashley. She was new to the job, and as they shook hands, Chris knew, without quite understanding why, that his life had just changed forever. Chris hadn't planned on becoming a regular at the bar, but after that first meeting, he found himself returning night after night. At first, he convinced himself it was just a comfortable place to unwind, but deep down, he knew the truth. He came for Ashley. Their conversations stretched longer each evening, flowing effortlessly from lighthearted banter to deeper confessions. She spoke about her dream of opening a small restaurant, her love for traveling, and her knack for finding humor in any situation. Chris, who had always been guarded, felt himself opening up in ways he never had before. Before he realized it, Ashley had become the most important person in his life. They spent evenings walking through the city, talking about everything and nothing. She wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his best friend, the one person he trusted completely. One night, as they sat on his rooftop gazing at the stars, he finally admitted what had become obvious. He couldn't imagine life without her. Ashley, her eyes shining, told him she felt the same. Their love burned fiercely, passionate, intense, sometimes turbulent, but always real. And when Chris's career ended abruptly due to injury, Ashley was the only thing keeping him from sinking. The loss of boxing shattered him, but she refused to let him spiral into despair. Every day, she reminded him he still had a future, still had strength left in him. One night, when he lay awake, drowning in doubt, she whispered, "You're stronger than you think." Her belief in him never wavered, even when he had none left in himself. Months later, as he started rebuilding his life, he knew he wanted to take the next step. On a quiet evening by the river under a sky full of stars, he got down on one knee. With a trembling voice, he told her that she had saved him, that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. When she nodded, eyes brimming with tears, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Their wedding was simple but perfect, filled with love, surrounded by family and close friends. With Ashley by his side, Chris found new purpose. She wasn't just his wife. She was his foundation, his second chance, the reason he believed in himself again. Their early years together were some of the happiest. They rented a small house near the gym, filling it with laughter, shared dreams, and quiet moments of comfort. Ashley became an integral part of his work, handling finances, organizing schedules, and creating a welcoming environment. Though she knew little about boxing, her presence in the gym was invaluable. She understood people, and her warmth made every student feel like they belonged. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Mornings spent making breakfast together, workdays filled with challenges, and evenings spent wrapped up in each other's presence. She was always there, supporting him through every setback, reminding him of his own strength. One evening, after a difficult loss at a competition, Chris came home exhausted, feeling like he had failed his students. He sat in silence, staring at the floor, until Ashley sat beside him, taking his hand. She reminded him that victories weren't the only measure of success. He was giving these young fighters something far more valuable: belief in themselves. Her words soothed him in a way nothing else could. Through every struggle, every small triumph, she was there, helping him become the best version of himself. They spent their free time walking in the park, escaping to nature, or simply curled up on the couch, savoring the peace of being together. Ashley wasn't just the love of his life. She was his greatest source of strength. Every year, their bond deepened. Even through disagreements, they never lost sight of what mattered most. Late at night, as Chris watched her sleep, he often found himself silently thanking fate for bringing her into his life. Looking back, he marveled at how a chance encounter at a bar had led to everything he cherished. Ashley had been there through his darkest moments, never letting him fall, never doubting his worth. She was, and always would be, his greatest blessing. Chris had always believed that his relationship with Ashley was unshakable. Over the years, their bond had deepened beyond passion and tenderness. They understood each other effortlessly. Their connection built on trust and shared experiences. They had faced highs and lows together, and he was certain nothing could ever come between them. One evening, after an exhausting day at the gym, Chris came home to the familiar warmth of Ashley's embrace. She greeted him with a smile that instantly eased his fatigue, her cozy sweater and the scent of a home-cooked meal making everything feel right. Over dinner, their conversation drifted to Tom, the new assistant at the gym. Ashley spoke highly of him, noting his dedication and how genuinely interested he seemed in their story. Chris agreed. Tom was a solid addition to the team. Casually, Chris suggested inviting Tom over for dinner. It would be a good chance to connect outside of work, and he knew Ashley enjoyed hosting. She was delighted by the idea and immediately started planning. The next day, she carefully selected fresh ingredients, filling their home with the inviting aroma of roasted meat and baked goods. When Tom arrived that evening, he seemed slightly unsure of himself, holding a bouquet of flowers for Ashley. She accepted them with a warm smile, instantly putting him at ease. The dinner was relaxed, filled with easy conversation. Tom listened attentively as Chris and Ashley shared stories about their journey, how they met, built the gym, and overcame obstacles together. "You two have something special," Tom remarked, admiration in his voice. "Not everyone finds a connection like this." Ashley exchanged a glance with Chris, her expression soft. "It takes trust," she said, "and always being there for each other." After dinner, they continued talking in the living room. discussing dreams and ambitions. As Chris listened, he saw something familiar in Tom. The same hunger, the same drive he had once had. It was clear Tom wanted more out of life, and Chris respected that. When Tom finally left, Ashley sighed contentedly. "I'm glad we invited him," she murmured, resting her head against Chris's chest. "Yeah," Chris agreed, holding her close. "He's a good guy." At first, he was happy that Ashley had taken an interest in the gym. She visited more often, engaged with the students, and helped organize events. It felt like they were even more connected. But gradually, something shifted. Ashley's focus on Tom became more noticeable. She frequently asked about his progress, his past, his ambitions. Whenever he entered the gym, her energy changed. Her eyes lit up, her laughter came easier, and she seemed more engaged. Chris told himself it was nothing, just friendly interest. Tom was easy to talk to, and it wasn't unusual for Ashley to be warm toward people. But then the invitations started. At first, the occasional dinner seemed natural. Tom was part of their team now, and Chris enjoyed his company. But soon, Ashley was inviting him over almost every night. What once felt casual now seemed deliberate. Chris couldn't ignore the nagging feeling creeping into his mind. Something was shifting, something he didn't want to acknowledge. Chris had noticed some tension in his relationship with Ashley, but tried to chalk it up to stress and exhaustion. After Tom's frequent visits to their home, Chris decided to bring it up gently, expressing his wish for more one-on-one time with Ashley. She seemed surprised and a bit distant, but agreed to tone it down. However, Chris began to notice a shift in her behavior, not just with Tom, but with him as well. She seemed colder, less affectionate, and withdrew from intimacy. He told himself it was just a phase, perhaps due to work stress, but his unease grew. He began to observe her more closely. Every time Tom was around, Ashley's demeanor changed. Her tone softened, her eyes sparkled a little brighter, and she laughed more freely. At first, Chris didn't think much of it, but soon he realized it wasn't just friendliness. Her increasing invitations for Tom to join them for dinner became frequent, and he couldn't ignore the growing discomfort inside him. One night, unable to hold back, Chris directly asked Ashley if something was going on. Her response was vague, brushing it off as stress. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the days went by, Ashley became more distant, avoiding deep conversations, staying late at the gym, and acting suspicious when he entered her office. Chris didn't want to believe the worst, but his anxiety grew with every passing day. It all began innocently enough. When Tom first joined the gym, Ashley treated him like any other employee. But as Chris was busy with his own responsibilities, Ashley took it upon herself to help Tom settle in. Their conversations started as professional, but gradually became more personal. Tom was a great listener, and before long, Ashley found herself confiding in him about things she usually only shared with Chris. Tom had a way about him that was hard to ignore. His compliments felt genuine and effortless, making Ashley smile in a way she hadn't in a while. What started as casual work-related chats evolved into deeper conversations. And soon, Ashley realized she was sharing more with Tom than she had intended. One evening, when Chris was occupied with training, Ashley and Tom found themselves alone in her office. The soft light and relaxed atmosphere set the stage for a more intimate conversation. Tom asked her if she was happy, and though she responded affirmatively, something about his question lingered in her mind. His attention and care seemed so genuine, and when he placed his hand over hers, she felt a wave of emotion. Tom's words about her devotion to Chris and how she deserved more stirred something inside her. For the first time, Ashley felt truly seen and appreciated in a way she hadn't in a long time. The connection with Tom, though innocent at first, began to blur the lines of her marriage. Ashley's feelings for Tom gradually shifted from simple friendship to something deeper. His attention made her heart race, and she began to crave his presence. Though she knew it was wrong, she couldn't resist the pull. Slowly, their conversations became more personal, and Tom became the first person in years to make her feel special, seen as more than just Chris's wife or a gym assistant. His compliments made her feel beautiful again, and before long she was eagerly awaiting his visits. She found herself avoiding Chris, fearing he would notice the change in her behavior. Ashley tried to convince herself it was just a fleeting attraction, something that would pass. But deep down, she knew it was out of her control. Every glance from Tom, every casual touch felt significant. She was caught in a dangerous spiral, torn between wanting to preserve her marriage and the overwhelming desire to explore her feelings for Tom. One evening, Chris returned to the gym late to pick up some forgotten documents. As he approached, he noticed the lights were still on, which was unusual since he had turned them off. When he reached the door, it was unlocked. His heart began to race as he cautiously entered, hearing faint laughter from inside. As he crept forward, a cold shiver ran down his spine. He reached the gym and froze in the doorway. There, under the spotlight in the ring, were Ashley and Tom, kissing passionately. His breath caught in his throat as he watched them, unable to move or speak. For a moment, he hoped it was just a nightmare, but the harsh reality sank in as he realized what was happening. Tom, the man Chris had trusted, was in his arms, touching his wife in ways Chris could never have imagined. Anger and devastation overwhelmed him as he stood in the dark, unable to tear his eyes away from the betrayal unfolding in front of him. The gym, once a symbol of his recovery and hope, now felt like a hollow, sacred place defiled by the very people he had trusted most. Chris stood there in silence, his heart shattering with each second. Slowly he turned and left, his body feeling heavy as he walked toward the door. The click of the lock echoed loudly in the stillness, and without hesitation, he shut off the lights, plunging the gym into darkness. Inside, Ashley and Tom broke their kiss, startled by the sudden blackness. Tom's voice trembled as he suggested it might be a power failure. They moved through the darkness, attempting to make sense of the situation. When they reached the front door, Tom tried to open it, but it was locked. "Someone locked us out," he said, his voice thick with panic. Ashley's heart raced as she turned to him. "Do you think anyone knows we're here?" she whispered. Tom hesitated, trying to stay calm. "Maybe it's just a coincidence," he said, but Ashley could hear the uncertainty in his voice. The fear in her grew stronger, and she squeezed his hand tightly. "Do we need to call Chris?" she asked, suddenly overwhelmed by the thought of him discovering the truth. Tom didn't respond immediately, but after a long moment, he shook his head. "I don't think we should. It might be nothing." But Ashley knew she couldn't hide from this forever. She had no idea how to face Chris after what had happened. Chris stood outside, his hand gripping the key as he locked the door, feeling a cold sense of control take over. He knew that sooner or later he'd have to confront Ashley and Tom, but for now, he wanted them to experience even a fraction of the pain and betrayal he felt. This gym, once a place of rebirth, had become a symbol of hurt. Anger was slowly replacing the shock and despair he'd felt earlier. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for the confrontation, needing to face the reality of what had just happened. He quietly entered the gym, listening to the muffled voices of Ashley and Tom. They were discussing how to handle the situation, and though they spoke softly, Chris could hear everything. Ashley's voice, tinged with anxiety, caught his attention. "What should we do now, Tom? What if someone saw us?" Tom's response sent a wave of fury through Chris. "Calm down. The main thing is that Chris doesn't find out." With that, Chris snapped. He flipped on the lights, startling both of them. They froze, staring in shock as Chris spoke in a calm but chilling voice. "It's too late. I already know everything." Ashley's face drained of color as she stammered, trying to justify herself, but Chris didn't listen. His gaze locked on Tom, who stood there, defiant and unashamed. "Chris, it's not what you think," Tom began, stepping forward, but Chris's rage overpowered him. He rushed forward and punched Tom squarely in the face, sending him to the ground. Fluid dripped from Tom's lip. "You were my friend," Chris said, towering over him. "I trusted you more than anyone." Tom wiped the fluid away and shot Chris a defiant look. "She wanted it. You were too busy with yourself to notice how unhappy she was." Chris felt a surge of anger and delivered another blow, followed by another, ignoring the pain in his fists. Each punch was filled with his heartbreak and betrayal. Ashley was standing to the side, crying and pleading, but her voice was drowned by Chris's fury. Tom, weakened, tried to fight back, but was no match for Chris's strength, the instinct of a former fighter coming alive again. Finally, Tom collapsed, breathing heavily, his eyes filled with hatred and fear. "You deserve this," Chris said, his voice ragged. "I trusted you. You were like a brother." He turned to Ashley, standing frozen in the corner, her face pale with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why?" he whispered. "What did I do wrong? What made you do this?" Ashley couldn't answer, her sobs the only response as she turned away. Chris walked away from them, the rage slowly draining, leaving only emptiness. "You destroyed everything I had. I hope it was worth it," he muttered as he walked out of the gym. In his car, Chris gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly ahead, the weight of betrayal crushing him. The scene replayed in his mind. Ashley in Tom's arms, the image surreal and painful. How had he missed this? When had he become blind to what was happening in his own life? He remembered the early days of their marriage, filled with warmth and love. Ashley had supported him through his darkest times, and he'd believed their bond was unbreakable. But somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of her. Maybe it was when he immersed himself in the gym, too focused on work to see his wife needed attention, or when he entrusted her with everything, forgetting she needed to feel loved and valued too. The realization hit him hard. He had created the conditions for this betrayal with his inattention. He thought of the times she smiled and laughed with Tom, memories now tainted with pain. His own naivety had made him blind to what was happening right under his nose. He squeezed the steering wheel, his knuckles white, unable to answer the question that kept repeating in his mind. What did I do wrong? He had worked so hard, loved her deeply, but it wasn't enough. His heart was torn, filled with a bitter mix of anger and disgust. He couldn't believe she had done this. How could she choose Tom, knowing the pain it would cause him? How could she betray him like this? The questions swirled in his mind, the rage building as he clenched his fists. Chris sat in his car, consumed by a storm of disbelief and pain. He couldn't understand how Ashley could betray him, destroy everything they had built together. His mind raced, and for the first time, he called her a word he never imagined: traitor. The weight of that realization hit him hard, as he understood that the life he'd known was forever gone. He couldn't undo what had been done, and the uncertainty ahead loomed like a painful void. Ashley returned home the next morning, exhausted and reeling from the events of the night. She'd spent hours at the hospital with Tom, nursing his injuries from Chris's fury. As she pulled into the driveway, she noticed Chris's car, and her heart skipped. She feared the worst. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. She called for him, but there was no response. When she reached their bedroom, she saw the bed unmade and empty, panic rising in her chest. The thought that Chris had already discovered the truth and left hit her like a brick. She spotted a note on the table, her hands trembling as she picked it up. The note was brief and to the point. I know everything. I won't make a scene. You've chosen your path, and I'm no longer a part of it. I'm leaving. Take everything: house, money, property. I hope Tom can give you what I couldn't. Chris. Ashley collapsed to the floor, her tears spilling as she read the words. The reality of what she'd done, the damage she'd caused, consumed her. She never expected Chris to leave without confrontation, quietly slipping away, leaving her with nothing but guilt. Sitting on their bed, Ashley reflected on the months of distance, how she'd let her affair with Tom spiral. She realized how much pain she'd caused Chris, the man who had always been there for her, loving her even when she felt neglected. Now, everything was shattered. The memories of their early days together, love, trust, care, were now lost. After hours of staring into space, Ashley tried calling Chris, but her trembling hands failed to dial. She knew deep down that she'd lost him forever. Now she had to face the consequences of her actions, and the weight of her betrayal was unbearable. In the hospital, Tom's condition deteriorated. He was permanently damaged, physically and emotionally, from the beating Chris had given him. His future was bleak, and his bitterness toward Ashley grew with every passing day. He became angry, blaming her for ruining his life. One evening, as Ashley sat by his bed, trying to comfort him, Tom snapped. "Go away!" he demanded, his anger boiling over. She was startled. "Tom, please, I'm just trying to help." He turned to her, his damaged eye barely able to focus. "It's your fault I'm like this," he hissed. "You ruined me. I lost my job, my health, my future because of you." His words hit her like a slap. She tried to explain, to apologize, but he wouldn't hear it. "Get out, Ashley," he spat. "I don't want anything from you." Feeling completely crushed, Ashley silently left the room. For the first time, she was alone, with no one left to turn to. Chris had left, and now Tom had rejected her. She was trapped in her own guilt and despair. The following days were a blur of guilt and loneliness for Ashley. She wandered through the empty house, overwhelmed by the weight of her actions. Her mind replayed everything: her marriage falling apart, Chris's silent departure, and the ruin of Tom's life. She constantly questioned how she let it all happen, why she didn't stop herself sooner, and why she couldn't appreciate what she had. She tried calling Chris, but his number was disconnected. No one knew where he had gone. It was as if he vanished from her life completely. She was left alone, realizing how much she depended on him, his love, support, and care. Without him, she felt lost and helpless. Days passed, and Ashley withdrew from everything. She refused to see friends or family, locking herself away in her home, a prisoner of her own remorse. As she sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at old photos, it hit her just how wrong she'd been. She had believed she could find happiness in betrayal, and now she was paying the price. She remembered the tenderness in Chris's eyes, his love and loyalty, and realized how cruelly she had treated him. Her life had split into two parts, before and after. She had lived in an illusion of happiness, but now the harsh truth was clear. She couldn't go back, and she had no idea how to move forward. Months passed, and Ashley became a shadow of her former self. Without Chris and after the fallout with Tom, she was empty. She avoided people and hid from her past, trying not to confront the reality of what she'd lost. One day, while at a cafe near the gym, she overheard a conversation that caught her attention. Two men were talking about an underground fighter, known only as the Shadow. He wore a mask, never showed his face, and had never lost a match. Something about the mention of the Shadow sent a chill down her spine. Could it be Chris? The fighter, the passion. It all seemed so familiar. But Chris had retired from boxing. He couldn't risk his health. Curiosity gnawed at her. She began quietly investigating, and the more she learned, the more she began to suspect that this fighter could be Chris. She discovered that these brutal fights took place in an abandoned building on the city's outskirts, drawing people who craved violence and adrenaline. Unable to resist, Ashley decided to attend one of the fights. She dressed in dark clothes and slipped into the crowded, tense hall. The makeshift ring stood in the center, surrounded by a rowdy crowd. When the masked fighter entered, Ashley's heart skipped a beat. His posture, his movements, it was unmistakably Chris. She watched in horror as he fought with terrifying intensity, as if punishing himself. She knew it was him. The fight ended quickly, and the masked fighter left the ring without a glance at his defeated opponent. Ashley, standing in the midst of the cheering crowd, felt tears sting her eyes. This was her doing. Chris was here, risking everything because of her. From that night on, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The image of Chris fighting in the shadows haunted her. Was he really putting his life on the line like this? All because of her mistakes? The thought consumed her. She had driven him to this dark place, and now she was powerless to stop his self-destruction. A few weeks later, Ashley heard rumors that the mysterious fighter would return to the underground ring. She had to go. She needed to see if it was truly Chris. The crowd in the hall was thick and charged with anticipation. Ashley hid in a corner, anxiety gnawing at her as she realized she had driven Chris to this life. The announcer's voice boomed, drawing everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, a fighter whose name we don't know but whose victories are legendary, the Shadow. Ashley's heart raced when the masked fighter entered. His movements, his posture, everything felt so familiar. She knew it was Chris. A mix of fear and bitter joy flooded her. The fighter's opponent was confident, but Ashley could see how calmly Chris waited for the fight to start, as if he knew the outcome. The gong rang out, and Chris launched forward with a swift, powerful blow, knocking his opponent down before he even had a chance to react. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Ashley couldn't hear them. Her eyes were fixed on him, on Chris. To her horror, the fighter slowly removed his mask. The crowd cheered again, but Ashley's world froze. It was him, Chris. Their eyes locked, and time seemed to stop. In his gaze, Ashley saw pain, anger, and disappointment, and something even deeper, something irreversible. She froze, unable to move or speak, tears welling up. Chris slowly put the mask back on and walked out of the ring, vanishing into the shadows. Ashley stood there, crushed by the realization that she had lost him, perhaps forever. Back at home, she sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a mug of cold coffee. Memories of her early days with Chris flooded her. She remembered when they first met. His smile, his strength, the way he made her feel safe. Their love had been intense, passionate, and full of promise. But somewhere along the way, she had taken it all for granted. She remembered how she had started to crave attention from Tom, how she had let her dissatisfaction pull her away from Chris. Now, she realized that everything she had destroyed was precious and rare. She had betrayed the one person who truly loved her. The image of Chris's face in the ring haunted her. His pain, his rage, it was all because of her. She had changed him into someone cold and distant, someone she didn't recognize. Ashley closed her eyes, guilt overwhelming her. She had caused this. She had destroyed their love. She wondered if there was any way to fix what she had done, or if it was too late. Could she ever get Chris back? With determination, Ashley decided to find him, to try and explain herself. even if she didn't deserve his forgiveness. She had to try. She stood near the back exit of the underground club, her hands trembling. Her heart beat loudly in her chest. This was her only chance to reach Chris, to stop him before he destroyed himself completely. The door finally opened, and Chris stepped into view, moving steadily towards her. His expression was unreadable, his eyes locked straight ahead as if he didn't even see her. He almost passed by her, but Ashley, summoning every ounce of strength, stepped into his path. "Chris, please!" Her voice wavered, filled with desperation. "You can't keep doing this. You had a severe head injury. If you keep fighting, you could die." He paused for just a moment, staring straight ahead, his eyes distant and cold, as though her words had no meaning. The warmth she once knew in his gaze was completely gone. Ashley's panic surged as she realized that the man in front of her wasn't the one she knew anymore. "Please!" she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Don't do this! For everything we had, please stop!" Chris lifted his eyes and met hers. For a brief second, it seemed like he might speak, but he remained silent. All she saw was emptiness and coldness. Without a word, he walked around her, continuing on his way as if she were nothing more than a memory he didn't want to face. Her heart shattered, and she stood there feeling completely invisible, abandoned, and lost. Everything she had hoped for was gone. She watched him walk away, knowing that she had just lost him forever. He had become a stranger to her, someone beyond reach, and that realization cut deeper than anything she had ever felt before. Collapsing onto the cold floor, Ashley sobbed, realizing this was her punishment for the mistake she had made. Now, she would have to live with the consequences for the rest of her life. Returning to the house, Ashley felt its cold, alien presence, like the walls themselves rejected her. Every step in the dark hall echoed with her isolation and despair. She threw her coat onto the sofa and sank beside it, powerless. The silence felt suffocating, as though it would choke her. Her tears no longer brought relief, becoming a mere routine of sorrow. Each night she sat alone, trapped in the painful memories of the past. She knew she had lost Chris forever. He would never forgive her. He would never return. The crushing weight of this truth consumed her every day, turning her life into an unending prison. The home that was once filled with love now felt like a place of torment, its walls echoing with accusations of betrayal. Despite all the pain, she couldn't stop attending the underground fights where Chris fought. She stood in the back, fists clenched, silently praying for his survival. Every hit he took or dealt felt like it tore at her own soul. After each fight, she tried again to talk to him, hoping, no, begging, that he would stop, listen, and understand that his life mattered more than the anger he carried. But each time, Chris walked by her as if she didn't exist. His indifference cut deeper with each rejection, making it painfully clear that the man she once loved was gone. In his place was a stranger, cold, unreachable, a man she no longer recognized. After each fight, Ashley returned home more broken than before, yet unable to stop going. It was the only way she could feel connected to him, even from afar. He no longer saw her, but she saw him, and somehow, in her tortured mind, that was enough. One evening, as she sat in the dark, the weight of her hopelessness hit her. Chris would never return. He would never forgive her. She had lost him forever, and now all she could do was live with that knowledge. The house felt darker and heavier. Life felt hollow. Ashley accepted that the punishment she was enduring was deserved. There was no escaping it. This was her burden to bear. She tried repeatedly to start over, to move, to change jobs, but nothing helped. The past always followed her, and every day she relived the loss of Chris, the one person who had truly loved her. One evening, staring at her phone, she was overwhelmed by the urge to text him. Her fingers shook as she started to type, but she knew it was pointless. Chris had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her. She set the phone down, the weight of despair settling in. Tears filled her eyes as she gazed at the photographs on the wall. Smiles, love, dreams of a future that would never be. She realized she had destroyed it all with one reckless choice. Chris's love, the one thing irreplaceable in her life, was gone. Her days were spent in isolation, pushing everyone away. The nights were the worst. She relived the last conversations, the look in Chris's eyes, pain, disappointment, and the worst of all, indifference. The memories tormented her, stealing her peace and rest. She knew she could never undo what she had done, and that truth felt like a life sentence she would carry forever. Ashley realized that she would have to come to terms with the consequences of her actions. She would live with the weight of guilt and regret, and somehow try to silence the pain. Meanwhile, Chris had long moved on. From the moment he walked away, he erased her from his life. No more pain, no more regret, just emptiness. And he filled that emptiness with his new reality: fighting. Chris had become something unrecognizable, merciless, unrelenting, driven by anger rather than discipline. The ring was no longer a place of honor or skill for him. It was an outlet for his inner torment. He didn't fight for fame or money. He fought to numb the rage and hurt that consumed him. Each fight was a battle not just with his opponent, but with the pain, the betrayal, and the memories that refused to fade. Pain became his escape, his release. It was the only way to silence the noise inside him. Over time, Chris became a feared figure in underground fights. His brutal style earned him a legendary reputation, and his cold indifference terrified even the toughest opponents. But fame meant nothing to him. All he sought was relief from the anger he carried. He cut himself off from the world, refusing to make connections, pushing everyone away. Even thoughts of Ashley faded, swallowed up by the blood and sweat of his battles. Sometimes he couldn't even remember her face, her voice. She had disappeared from his life, a part of his past, a painful mistake that still haunted him. But when the noise of the world settled, when he was alone with his thoughts, memories of Ashley always returned. He remembered the happiness they once shared, the kind of joy he hadn't felt since. Those memories broke through the walls he had built around himself. And when they did, he sought the ring to bury them once more. Fighting had become his escape, his only way to push the past away. Chris lived only in the present. Pain. The past no longer mattered, and the future was non-existent. He had accepted this life without regret. The fights were his only reality, the only reason he woke up each day. As long as he felt the pain of his battles, he knew he was still alive, still capable of feeling something, anything, besides the emptiness inside. Ashley stood at the entrance of the underground club, her heart pounding with the weight of the moment. Tonight was her final visit, to see Chris fight one last time and close the door on their past. She had received a job offer in another city, and now she wanted to leave behind everything that reminded her of loss and regret. The crowd was as rowdy as ever, hungry for violence and spectacle. Ashley pushed through, making her way to her usual spot in the back, trying to stay unnoticed. She found Chris almost immediately, his familiar form in the ring, warming up, focused and cold. He looked so different now, so distant. But in the stillness of that moment, she saw the man she once loved, and the pain of it all hit her again. The fight began. Chris's opponent was young and strong, but Chris moved with confidence and skill, his experience evident in every calculated strike. Ashley watched in awe, unable to look away. But then, things went wrong. His opponent found an opening, delivering a brutal blow straight to Chris's head. Ashley's heart stopped. Time seemed to slow as Chris stumbled, struggling to stay upright. And then, he collapsed. The room went silent. "Chris!" Ashley's scream cut through the stillness. She pushed through the crowd, her hands shaking as she rushed to his side, falling to her knees beside him. She grabbed his hand, desperately searching for any sign of life. "Chris, please, wake up!" she cried, her voice breaking. But his eyes were vacant, lifeless. Ashley's hands trembled as she cradled his face, willing him to respond. But deep inside, she knew it was too late. "Chris!" she shouted again, but the sound felt hollow, swallowed by the chaos around her. In that moment, something inside her shattered beyond repair. This was her punishment, the ultimate consequence. The man she had betrayed was gone forever, and she was left in a world that no longer made sense. Kneeling there, on the floor, holding his cold hand, Ashley cried. This was the end, their last moment together, and it was too late for anything to change. Now she was truly alone, alone with her guilt, alone with the consequences of a life she had destroyed. Her punishment was cruel and deserved. She would live every day knowing that she had lost the one person who had ever truly loved her. Forever. The night of Chris's death had been the final blow. She had arrived at the underground fight in a desperate attempt to see him, to speak to him, to beg for forgiveness. But the image of him lying unconscious in the ring, his body broken and battered, was too much. She had cried out his name, but he didn't respond. His body lay motionless, his spirit seemingly gone before her eyes. In the days that followed, The weight of his absence suffocated her. The gym remained silent, devoid of the life Chris had once brought to it. His memory lingered in every corner, every punch bag, every echo of a life he had poured his soul into. And she had destroyed it all. She had destroyed him. Ashley couldn't bring herself to leave the gym. She wandered through its empty halls as though waiting for him to walk through the door. But he never would. The realization settled in like a cold, suffocating fog. She was alone. The man she had once loved, the man who had been her world, was never coming back. And it was her fault. She had betrayed him, allowed her own selfish desires to overshadow everything they had built together. In her pursuit of something fleeting with Tom, she had destroyed the most important thing in her life. And now, Chris was dead, a victim of her own weakness, her own inability to appreciate what she had until it was too late. She thought of all the times she had taken him for granted, how he had been there for her, supporting her through every storm, always steady, always strong. She had loved him, but she had failed him. The guilt gnawed at her, twisting in her stomach like a constant ache. She could never undo what had happened. He was gone, and she was left to live in the shadow of her mistakes. The funeral was a blur. Friends, old gym members, and even strangers who had admired Chris's legacy gathered to pay their respects. Ashley stood there, numb, her heart shattered in ways she never thought possible. She could feel his absence in every corner, his presence now just a memory that haunted her every waking moment. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life, if you could call it that, continued for Ashley. But it was a hollow existence. She wandered through her days, a ghost of the woman she used to be. The weight of her guilt pressed down on her, leaving her incapable of feeling anything but the constant, suffocating emptiness that had replaced everything. She continued to visit the gym, but it no longer felt like home. It was just a place, a reminder of the life she had destroyed. Every time she walked through the door, she half expected Chris to be there, waiting for her with that warm smile of his, the one that had made her feel like everything would be okay. But there was nothing. No Chris, no warmth, just the cold, harsh reality of the life she had ruined. And in the quiet of the gym, as she sat on the bench where he had once sat beside her, Ashley finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had done. Chris was gone. She would never hear his voice again, never feel his embrace, never see his eyes light up with the same love and understanding that had always been there. He was gone, and all she had now was the relentless ache of regret. She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. In the silence, she whispered a goodbye she never thought she would have to say. She had lost everything, and there was no going back.